Imagine sitting in the middle of a storm, wind roaring, branches snapping, everything around you shaking, yet inside you feel nothing but stillness. Not numbness, not indifference, but a calm so deep that even chaos bows before it. Most people think this kind of peace belongs only to monks meditating in the mountains. But here's the truth. The storm isn't the problem. It's the way our mind clings to the storm that makes us suffer. And Buddha captured this perfectly when he said, "You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger." We think the world hurts us. But most of the time, it's our own mind tightening around fear, frustration, expectations, and disappointment that does the real damage. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by people's words, shaken by life's uncertainties, or drained by things you cannot control, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not powerless. There is a path to becoming untouchable. Not cold, not emotionless, but free from the mental habits that steal your peace. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that the smallest things tend to hurt the most? A comment, a change of plan, a delay, a mistake. It's never the thing itself. It's the meaning we attach to it. It's the story we tell ourselves afterward. It's the way we keep replaying it long after the moment has passed. Imagine what your life would look like if those stories no longer controlled you. If instead of reacting, you could pause, breathe, and choose clarity. Imagine having a mind so steady that even when life shakes, you don't. That is what this video is about. The art of building an unshakable mind. A mind that doesn't break every time something goes wrong. A mind that doesn't collapse under stress. A mind that transforms every challenge into wisdom, strength, and inner freedom. And here's where it gets even more surprising. Developing this kind of mindset has nothing to do with being perfect. You don't need to meditate for 10 hours a day. You don't need to move to a monastery. You don't need to escape life. You only need to understand 7 powerful principles, ancient Buddhist teachings, modern psychology, and practical techniques that you can apply today, right here in the middle of your busy, imperfect, beautiful life. Because the moment you stop fighting reality, the moment you stop clinging to expectations, the moment you stop letting your emotions dictate your worth, you become untouchable. Not because the world is gentle, but because your mind becomes strong. And once that happens, you'll start to notice something incredible. Life doesn't get easier. You get wiser. People don't change, but your reactions do. The world doesn't stop throwing storms at you, but you learn how to stand in the rain without losing yourself. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand what an untouchable mindset is, you'll feel it. You'll see exactly how the mind creates suffering and how you can step out of it, starting today. And the most powerful part? The transformation begins with a single shift. A shift I'm about to reveal in the very first lesson. But first, ask yourself this. What if the peace you've been searching for was never outside of you, but hidden inside your own mind, waiting to be unlocked? Stay with me. The doorway opens now. Part 1. Control your inner dialogue. Let me tell you a story about someone. I once met someone a lot like you, and honestly, a lot like me. His name was Michael. On the outside, he looked perfectly fine. A stable job, a family he loved, a calm face that made people think he had it all together. But inside? Inside, he was living with a constant storm, one made not of other people's words, but of his own. Every morning, he woke up to the same silent whisper in his mind. You're behind. You're not good enough. You should be further in life by now. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. Drip, 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 like water wearing down a stone. Maybe you've felt that too, the quiet self-judgment no one else can hear. The conversation you never speak out loud, but it decides how your entire day unfolds. And what shocked Michael the most wasn't the negativity. It was the realization that he had never questioned it. He simply believed every word his mind told him. One day, during a particularly overwhelming week, he listened to a Buddhist monk speak about inner dialogue. And the monk said something that hit him with the force of a lifetime of truth. Your mind is always talking. The question is, who is speaking? Your fear or your wisdom? That question stayed with him. Because for the first time in his life, Michael realized he had spent years being loyal to the wrong voice. Think about your own inner world for a moment. If your mind were a friend following you around all day, repeating out loud the same things it whispers in silence, would you even want that friend near you? Would you trust them? Would you feel supported, uplifted, strengthened? Or would you ask them to leave? Most people wouldn't tolerate from others what they allow from their own mind every single day. This is where the path of inner strength truly begins, not with changing your circumstances, but with changing how you speak to yourself when circumstances get hard. Because the truth is simple. You cannot build an unshakable mind using the language of self-attack. And when you really look at it through the lens of Buddhist wisdom, the mind is like a garden. If you leave it unattended, weeds will always grow automatically. Not because you're broken, but because the human mind is trained by evolution to look for danger, to criticize, to judge, to prepare for the worst. So the negative voice inside you, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your mind has been running on autopilot for too long. What changed everything for Michael was something surprisingly small, not a huge breakthrough, not a life-changing event, not a spiritual retreat in the mountains. It was a single sentence he decided to practice every morning. I speak to myself with the same compassion I would offer someone I love. At first, it felt strange, unnatural, even a little ridiculous. Because the old voice, the voice of doubt and criticism, was used to being in control, like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. But day by day, something shifted. Whenever the old thoughts appeared, you're failing. You're not enough. You always mess things up. He paused, took one mindful breath, and answered with a new voice, a steady voice, a wiser voice. I'm doing my best. I am learning. I deserve patience too. I am growing through this. Not empty affirmations. Not forced positivity, but compassionate truth. And slowly, the war inside him softened. His reactions changed. His stress lessened. His confidence no longer depended on whether the day went well or fell apart, because he realized something powerful. You cannot control the world, but you can control the tone of the voice inside you. And that tone becomes the foundation of your inner life. Think about the challenges in your own life right now, the pressures, the failures, the uncertainties. What if the real problem is not the situation, but the voice you use to face it? When something goes wrong, what does your mind say? Does it say, "You're helpless," or "You'll figure it out"? When you make a mistake, does it say, "You always mess up," or "This is part of learning. Let's try again"? These tiny shifts are not tiny at all. They shape your identity. They shape your resilience. They shape your peace. Because here is the truth many people never hear. The way you speak to yourself becomes the way you experience your entire life. If the dialogue changes, everything changes. Imagine waking up tomorrow and hearing a new inner voice, one that doesn't shame you for feeling tired, one that doesn't attack you for not being perfect, one that doesn't compare you to everyone else. Imagine a voice that says, "You're human. You're evolving. You are allowed to try again. You are worthy of kindness, especially from yourself." And here's the beautiful part. That voice is not something you need to create. It already exists inside you. You've simply been tuning into the wrong channel for too long. Buddhist teachings say, what you think, you become. What you speak, you plant. What you nurture, you grow. So let me ask you gently, what are you growing inside your mind right now? Because if you learn to master your inner dialogue, not silence it, not force it, not fight it, but soften it, guide it, and choose it, you will begin to build the kind of strength nothing in the outside world can shake. And that is the first step toward an unbreakable mind. Part 2. Master Emotional Control. Let me introduce you to someone named Sarah. She's the kind of person everyone sees as strong, organized, responsible, the one who can handle anything. But what no one knows is that each day feels like she's walking through life carrying a glass of water filled right to the brim. The slightest bump, and everything spills. Her emotions weren't wild or dramatic. They were quiet, but overwhelming waves that rose so fast she didn't even have time to understand them. A harsh email from her boss. A comment from a friend said in the wrong tone. A small mistake that she replayed in her mind for hours. Every tiny trigger felt like an explosion inside her chest. And afterward, she'd think to herself, why can't I control this? What's wrong with me? Maybe you felt that too, the sense that your emotions are happening to you, not from you. Like life keeps pressing invisible buttons, and you don't know how to stop reacting. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Sarah found herself listening to a Buddhist teacher who said something that changed the way she understood her inner world forever. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your freedom. A space, not a big one, not a dramatic one. Just a tiny pause, like a breath, like a heartbeat hidden between what happens to you and what you do next. But Sarah realized something painful. She had never once stepped into that space. Her emotions were faster than her awareness, quicker than her wisdom. She didn't respond. She reacted. And here's the truth. Most of us are living exactly like that. We're not choosing our emotions. We're not responding with clarity. We're simply repeating old patterns, patterns we never questioned, patterns that keep us caught in the same loops of anger, fear, guilt, or anxiety. So Sarah made a decision. A small one, but one that required unbelievable courage. She decided to spend 1 week practicing just one thing. Whenever she felt triggered, she would pause just for a moment and observe the emotion instead of becoming it. Not suppressing. Not being positive. Just observing. The first day, it barely worked. The pause lasted a second before the reaction took over. But that second, it was a seed. On the second day, she paused again, this time for 2 seconds, noticing the heat in her chest, the tightness in her throat, the surge of irritation rising like fire. And in that tiny pause, something new happened. She realized the emotion wasn't her enemy. It wasn't something to fight or judge. It was simply a signal, her body trying to tell her, something inside needs attention. This is where Buddhist wisdom becomes profoundly practical. Emotional control isn't about being cold or unfeeling. It's not about staying calm no matter what. It's about understanding, recognizing the emotion, seeing its shape, and choosing what to do with it. Because the moment you observe a feeling with awareness, it loses its power to control you. By the 4th day, Sarah started seeing patterns. Her anger always came when she felt disrespected. Her anxiety came when she felt she wasn't enough. Her sadness came when she felt unheard. The emotions were not random. They were messengers. And here's what surprised her most. The more she allowed herself to feel, the less overwhelming the feelings became. Instead of reacting from fear, she responded from presence. Instead of spiraling into stories, she stayed with the sensation. Instead of exploding or shutting down, she breathed. And breathing is not a small thing. Breathing is awareness. Breathing is choice. Breathing is the doorway back to that sacred space between trigger and response. One afternoon, her boss sent another sharp email. The kind that used to ruin her whole day. She felt the familiar discomfort rise up. But this time, she closed her eyes for a moment. She put a gentle hand on her chest, and she whispered to herself, "Pause." Then something almost miraculous happened. Instead of reacting emotionally, she saw the situation clearly. Her boss was stressed. The office was overloaded. The email wasn't about her worth. It was simply a moment in a busy day. For the first time, she responded instead of reacting. And that single choice changed her entire relationship with her emotions. Because here's the secret the world never teaches you. Emotional mastery isn't about controlling your feelings. It's about controlling the moment before your feelings take over. It's about knowing what's rising inside you before the wave hits. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time your emotions carried you into a reaction you later regretted? A text you wish you hadn't sent? A tone you wish you hadn't used? A decision made from fear instead of clarity? We've all been there. And the solution is not to shut your emotions down, but to open your awareness up. Imagine this for a moment. A life where your emotions still arise because you're human, but they no longer dictate your choices. A life where triggers become teachers, where irritation becomes insight, where sadness becomes softness, where anger becomes understanding, where fear becomes growth. That is emotional mastery. Not the absence of feeling, but the presence of wisdom. And when you step into that space between stimulus and response, you don't just gain control over your emotions. You gain control over your life. Because the person who owns that space owns their freedom, their peace, their future. And that is the power of mastering your emotions. Part 3. Focus on what you can control. I want to tell you about someone named David, a man who spent most of his life trying to control everything: his job, his relationships, his future, even the reactions of the people around him. He believed that if he could just manage every detail perfectly, life would finally feel safe. But life doesn't work that way. And deep down, he knew it. Every morning he woke up with a kind of pressure sitting heavy on his chest, this constant belief that he was responsible not only for his own happiness, but for everyone else's too. If someone was upset, he felt like he had to fix it. If someone misunderstood him, he had to explain. If someone treated him unfairly, he had to reclaim control. The problem was, the more he tried to control, the more out of control he felt. Maybe you've experienced something like that, a kind of emotional exhaustion that comes from trying to hold the entire world together with your bare hands. One day, during a moment of complete frustration, David found himself reading a Buddhist teaching that said, "You cannot calm the storm, but you can calm yourself, and the storm will pass." Something about those words struck him, because for the first time, he realized he had been fighting the wrong battle. He was trying to calm the storm outside while ignoring the storm inside. This is a truth many people go their whole lives without seeing. Most suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from trying to control what we were never meant to control. And that was David's turning point. He decided to do something he had never done before. He started listing everything in his life that drained his energy. Then he wrote 2 columns. Things I can control. Things I cannot control. At first, he expected the second column to be short, but it wasn't. It was pages long. People's opinions, people's expectations, people's decisions, the speed of his career, the past, the future, the economy, the weather, traffic, time. He stared at it and felt a strange mix of shock and relief, because he realized something almost painful. Most of what he worried about was never his to carry. Then he looked at the first column. It was much shorter, but far more powerful. His attitude, his actions, his habits, his boundaries, his effort, his inner dialogue, his reactions, how he treated others, how he showed up when life got hard. And suddenly, he understood. This small list was where his real power had been hiding all along. That realization changed him. The next time someone was rude to him, instead of obsessing over why they acted that way, he asked himself, how do I want to respond? The next time work became overwhelming, instead of trying to control every factor, he focused on what he could do today, this hour, this moment. The next time someone misunderstood him, instead of chasing validation, he reminded himself, I cannot control how they see me. I can only control how I carry myself. And slowly, life stopped feeling like a battlefield. It started feeling like a practice. There is something profoundly freeing about returning your energy to where it belongs. Because when you release what you cannot control, you reclaim the strength you didn't even realize you were losing. Let me ask you something directly. How much of your stress comes not from the situation, but from resisting the fact that you cannot control it? How many times have you replayed a conversation in your mind, even though it's already over? How often have you tried to change someone who doesn't want to change? How much energy have you given to things that were never yours to manage? Buddhist wisdom teaches this simple but life-changing truth. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Pain happens, we all lose, fail, get rejected, get hurt. But suffering comes from clinging, from fighting reality, from refusing to let things simply be as they are. David learned this the hard way. One evening, his friend confronted him with harsh words accusing him of things he didn't do, projecting their own frustration onto him. Old David would have spiraled. What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? How do I make them see the truth? But David paused. He took a breath. He remembered, I cannot control their perception. I can only control my integrity. So he responded calmly, clear, honest, without trying to convince, defend, or manipulate the outcome. And for the first time in years, he walked away not feeling drained, but empowered. Because power doesn't come from controlling others. Power comes from controlling yourself. Imagine your own life for a moment. What would change if you stopped pouring energy into things that refuse to change? What would happen if you focused instead on the small, steady actions you can control? Your routines, your mindset, your reactions, your growth? A life built on inner control becomes a life built on inner peace. Because when your energy turns inward, you stop being tossed around by the world outside you. And that, at its core, is what unshakable strength looks like. Not perfection, not dominance, not control over others, but clarity, ownership, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing my power lives within me, not out there. When you embrace that truth, your life begins to shift. Stress softens, anxiety loosens, fear loses its grip, because you are finally living from the inside out, not the outside in. And that is what it means to focus on what you can truly control. Part 4. Detachment is your superpower. Have you ever noticed how heavy life feels when you're holding on too tightly to a person, an outcome, or a story you've told yourself about how things should be? I want to tell you a story about someone named Maya. Maya was the kind of person who cared deeply, almost too deeply. Every message left unseen, every silence in a conversation, every small change in someone's tone. She felt it like a storm inside her chest. And to her, letting go always sounded like losing. Losing control. Losing connection. Losing the things she thought she needed to be okay. Maybe you felt that too. But here's the truth she never learned growing up. Detachment isn't about losing. It's about freedom. It's about no longer being dragged around by expectations, fears, or the behavior of people you can't control. And that's what we're going to explore together. At one point, Maya found herself in a situation we all face eventually. She cared so much about a relationship that she forgot to care about herself. Every day, she would replay conversations, overanalyze messages, try to predict what would happen next, or wonder what she had done wrong. Meanwhile, life was passing. Her mornings tasted like anxiety. Her evenings felt like waiting rooms, just waiting for someone to say the thing that would make her feel secure again. But security built on someone else's behavior never lasts. And deep down, she knew it. One night, sitting alone in her car outside a grocery store, too overwhelmed to even go inside, she whispered something that changed everything. "I can't live like this anymore." Not because she stopped loving, but because she finally realized the difference between attachment and connection. Attachment says, without this person, this outcome, this result, I'm nothing. This person, nothing with have a crossed. Connection says, I can love you deeply and still be whole on my own. This is where real detachment begins. Not coldness, not indifference, but clarity. Clarity that your peace is yours. Clarity that freedom comes when you stop gripping life with fear. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering comes from clinging. Clinging to what we want, clinging to what we fear losing, clinging to the way things used to be, or the way we imagine they should be. But when we loosen that grip, even slightly, something incredible happens. Life starts to breathe again. And so do we. Maya didn't transform overnight. At first, she practiced in the smallest ways. When someone didn't text her back right away, instead of spiraling, she paused and breathed. When plans shifted, she let them shift without telling herself it meant anything about her worth. When she caught her mind chasing what she couldn't control, she gently brought it back to what she could. Little by little, she discovered something surprising. She wasn't losing anything. She was regaining herself. And isn't that what most of us truly want? To wake up without that quiet anxiety under the skin. To move through life with a lighter heart. To care without collapsing. To love without losing ourselves inside the love. Detachment is your superpower for one simple reason. It puts your happiness back in your own hands. When you're not dependent on a specific outcome, you become unstoppable. Think about it. If a conversation goes well, great. If it doesn't, you're still grounded. If someone stays, wonderful. If they leave, you remain whole. If your plan succeeds, you celebrate. If it changes, you adapt without breaking. Detachment makes you flexible where you once were fragile, strong where you once felt scared. It's not about caring less, it's about caring wisely. Because here's the paradox. When you stop clinging, you actually love better, without fear, without pressure, without needing someone or something to fill the spaces inside you. And people can feel that difference. A detached heart is not distant. It's balanced. It's peaceful. It's free enough to give without demanding, open enough to receive without fear, wise enough to stay without clinging. So let me ask you something. What are you gripping right now? A relationship? A version of yourself you've outgrown? A future that hasn't arrived? A past that won't return? What would shift inside you if you loosened your grip just a little? Imagine waking up tomorrow and saying to yourself, I choose peace over control. I choose presence over expectation. I choose freedom over fear. That is detachment. That is power. And it's available to you at any moment starting now. Maya eventually looked back at her journey and realized something profound. Nothing outside her had changed. The people, the circumstances, the uncertainties, they were still there. But she had changed. The storm still came, but she wasn't swept away anymore. And that's what I want for you. Not a life without storms, but a heart that knows how to stand in them without losing itself. Because when you understand detachment, really understand it, no one can pull your peace from you again. You become unshakable. You become grounded. You become free. Detachment isn't losing. It's coming home to yourself. Accept reality as it is. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment in life where you wished, with every part of your heart, that reality would just be different? Maybe it was a relationship that ended too soon, a dream that didn't unfold the way you imagined, a difficult truth you weren't ready to face. We've all been there. And today, I want to take you into the story of someone who struggled with this more than anything. A man named Daniel. Daniel was the kind of person who fought life with everything he had. On the outside, he looked strong, responsible, put together. But on the inside, he was exhausted from trying to change things that were already done, already decided, already out of his hands. His marriage had fallen apart. His business partnership collapsed right after. And he kept replaying it all in his mind, like a movie he couldn't turn off. What if I had done this? Why didn't she say that? Why did this have to happen now? Every day felt like a war between him and reality. A war he could never win. And maybe you've had your own version of that war too. One evening, after weeks of sleepless nights, Daniel sat alone in his living room. The house was quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the kind that echoes everything you're trying to avoid. He stared at the divorce papers on the table. He stared at the failed business contract in his inbox. And he whispered the same sentence over and over. This isn't fair. This isn't how my life was supposed to go. But here's the truth Buddhist wisdom tries to teach us gently, again and again. Most suffering doesn't come from what happened. It comes from our refusal to accept that it already has. Pain is natural, but resistance is optional. And resistance is what keeps us stuck. One day, a close friend invited Daniel to a small meditation class. He didn't really want to go. He felt too angry, too raw, too defeated. But he went anyway, mostly because he didn't know what else to do with the pain. The teacher, an older woman with the calmest voice he'd ever heard, said something that cracked him open. You don't have to like reality, but you can stop fighting it. Simple, but it shook him. Because for the first time, he realized something important. He wasn't hurting because life was cruel. He was hurting because he was clinging to the way life used to be and refusing to make space for the way life actually was. That's when she added, acceptance isn't giving up. It's giving yourself permission to breathe again. And suddenly, he felt something loosen inside his chest. Acceptance isn't passive. It doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It doesn't mean the pain disappears overnight. It simply means you stop pouring your energy into a past that won't rewrite itself. It means you choose to see things clearly, even when they hurt. Because clarity is the beginning of healing. But accepting reality is one of the hardest things any of us will ever do. Why? Because we all carry a version of life in our minds. A story of how things were supposed to unfold. And when reality doesn't match that story, our hearts resist. We think resisting keeps us strong. We think resisting means we still care. But in truth, resisting freezes us exactly where we are. As weeks passed, Daniel began practicing small moments of acceptance. When a memory of his ex-wife came up, instead of pushing it away, he whispered, "Yes, this happened. It hurts. And that's okay." When business losses resurfaced in his mind, instead of drowning in regret, he told himself, "I did the best I could with who I was then." When loneliness appeared unexpectedly, instead of fighting it, he sat with it like a guest at the table. And slowly, the weight started to lift. Not because his circumstances changed, but because he stopped resisting them. He stopped trying to control what was already carved into the past. He freed the energy that had been trapped inside regret, anger, and denial. Acceptance became the key that unlocked his breath again. So let me ask you directly, what part of your life are you struggling to accept right now? A loss? A mistake? A conversation that didn't go the way you imagined? A truth about someone you care about? Or maybe a truth about yourself? What would soften in you if you simply said, "This is what is. I may not like it, but I will stop fighting it"? Imagine the energy that would return to you. Imagine the clarity. Imagine the peace. Because acceptance doesn't trap you. It frees you to finally move forward. Months later, Daniel looked back and realized something powerful. Reality had never been the enemy. His fight against reality was, and when he stopped fighting, life didn't collapse. It expanded. He began rebuilding not from bitterness, but from clarity. Not from fear, but from grounded truth. Not from the version of life he wished he had, but from the life that was actually in front of him. This is what acceptance gives us. A clean starting point. A quiet heart. A path forward. And maybe the most important lesson of all, when you accept reality as it is, you return to yourself as you are. Not broken, not defeated, simply human, and ready for the next chapter. Part 6. Reframe pain as growth. Let me share a story with you today. A story about someone who thought pain was a punishment until life showed her something entirely different. Her name is Maya. From the outside, she looked like the kind of person who had everything figured out. A steady job, a loving partner, dreams that felt close enough to touch. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Within the span of a single year, everything seemed to fall apart for her. Her relationship ended without warning. Her mother got sick, and the startup she poured her heart into collapsed before it ever launched. It was one wave of loss after another, and no matter how strong she tried to be, she felt like she was drowning. One night, as she sat alone in her car outside the hospital, she whispered a question many of us have asked at least once. Why does life hurt so much? And why does it always seem to happen all at once? The exhaustion, the pressure, the sense of being cracked open in places she never knew existed. It all felt unbearable. And maybe you've had your own version of this moment too. A season where everything came crashing down at the same time, and you wondered if you were being punished or pushed past your limit. But here's a truth Buddhist wisdom invites us to rediscover. Pain isn't a punishment. It's a doorway. A strange, uncomfortable, unwelcome doorway. But a doorway nonetheless. Weeks later, during one of the rare quiet nights at home, Maya came across an old bonsai tree on her windowsill. It was a gift from her father years ago, back when life felt lighter. The plant looked fragile. Some leaves had turned brown. The branches looked stiff. It almost seemed like it had stopped growing. As she picked it up, she noticed something. A tiny crack on the pot, caused by the roots pushing outward. And just like that, something inside her shifted. Growth often begins in places that look like breaking. The roots of the tree weren't destroying the pot out of violence. They were expanding. They were outgrowing their old space. They were doing exactly what they were meant to do. It wasn't breaking. It was evolving. And for the first time, she wondered, What if my pain isn't the end of something, but the beginning? That single question changed the entire direction of her healing. She started paying attention to her pain in a different way. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" she began to ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" It didn't remove the hurt overnight. It didn't make the losses suddenly fair or easy, but it gave her meaning. And meaning, even a small one, can carry us through the darkest nights. Over time, she realized something powerful. Every painful experience had been shaping her quietly, slowly, deeply, into a different version of herself. More patient, more grounded, more aware of what truly mattered. Her heartbreak taught her the difference between attachment and love. Her mother's illness taught her how precious time is. Her failed startup taught her resilience, creativity, humility. Each wound left a doorway. Each doorway led her inward. And inside, she found strength she didn't know she had. Maybe you've heard this image before. A seed must break open in the dark soil before it becomes a tree. From the outside, the breaking looks like destruction. But in truth, it's transformation. Pain works exactly the same way. It cracks us open, not to destroy us, but to make room for a larger version of who we are meant to become. But you need to allow yourself to feel it. You need to honor the breaking. Because ignoring the pain doesn't make it disappear, it just hides the lesson inside it. Buddhist wisdom says, the wound is the place where the light enters. And maybe that's why some of the most compassionate, wise, and grounded people you've ever met are people who once walked through fire. So let me ask you gently, what pain are you carrying right now? What part of your life feels cracked, uncomfortable, out of control? And just for a moment, what if this breaking is not a sign of failure, but a sign of growth? What if life is not crushing you, but stretching you? What if you're not losing yourself, but shedding an older version of you that can no longer contain who you're becoming? Take a breath. Let that possibility sit with you. Months later, Maya looked back at her journey with a clarity she never expected. Nothing was wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the fear, not the disappointment. Every part of it had carved out space inside her. Space for deeper love, firmer boundaries, a kinder relationship with herself. The pain didn't make her perfect. It made her real, open, awake. And that's when she realized growth doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like breaking, but breaking is how light gets in. Part 7. Embrace amor fati. Love your fate. Let me tell you a story about someone named Daniel, a man who spent years fighting against life until he discovered a truth that quietly changed everything. For most of his adult life, Daniel believed that happiness came from having control. Control over his plans, control over his future, control over how people treated him. And as long as things went his way, he felt strong, almost invincible. But life doesn't enter a contract with our expectations. It doesn't promise that things will unfold the way we want. One year, everything he tried to hold together started slipping through his fingers. His business partner backed out of an important deal. His long-term relationship ended with a single conversation. And even his physical health began to falter, forcing him to stop the gym routine he was proud of for years. Suddenly, the man who thought he could control everything couldn't control anything anymore. And he spiraled. The anger, the resistance, the constant voice in his mind saying, "This shouldn't be happening. This is unfair. This is not my life." It exhausted him more than the events themselves. Maybe you've felt this too. That painful tension between the life you imagined and the life you're actually facing. One evening, during a quiet walk, he ended up sitting alone on a park bench. No distractions. No excuses. Just him and the uncomfortable truth that life was reshaping itself in ways he didn't want. As he sat there, an older man feeding birds nearby said something so simple yet so unexpected. He looked at Daniel and said, "You know, life gets lighter when you stop arguing with reality." Daniel didn't understand at first, but the man continued, "Most people accept what happens to them, but very few learn to love what happens to them. And that's where the real freedom is." Those words stayed with him for days. This is the essence of amor fati, the philosophy of not just accepting your fate, but loving it as if you had chosen it yourself. It sounds impossible at first, doesn't it? How can you love heartbreak? How can you love uncertainty? How can you love losing something you fought so hard to build? But Buddhist wisdom offers a gentle doorway into this idea. Life is not happening to you. Life is happening for you. Not as a punishment, not as a test, but as a teacher. Every event, pleasant or painful, contains a seed of transformation. You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt. You don't have to fake positivity. You simply shift the question from, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "What if this is exactly what I needed to grow?" That tiny shift is how acceptance turns into strength, and strength turns into peace. For Daniel, the turning point came unexpectedly. He was reorganizing his apartment one morning when he found an old journal from years ago. Inside, he had written goals, dreams, and a list of things he hoped to avoid at all costs. As he read through it, he began to see something strange. The events he feared the most were the very events that ended up shaping him the most. Losing his job years earlier forced him into the career he now loved. A painful breakup in his 20s had taught him how to be more emotionally aware. A failed business partnership had pushed him toward a healthier, more aligned opportunity. He realized something astonishing. Life wasn't breaking him. It was guiding him. Every detour had purpose. Every loss had direction. Every ending had been an opening. And suddenly, amor fati didn't feel like a strange philosophy from a book. It felt personal, real, alive. He began practicing it in small ways. When something went wrong, he paused and asked himself, "What if this too is part of my path? What if this is happening for me?" Instead of resisting, he leaned in. Instead of blaming, he breathed. Instead of shrinking, he grew. And life slowly, gradually, felt lighter. Not because the circumstances changed instantly, but because he wasn't fighting them anymore. That's the real power of amor fati. What you embrace can no longer control you. What you accept can no longer imprison you. What you love transforms you. So let me ask you gently, what part of your life are you still resisting? What event do you replay in your mind, wishing it happened differently? What pain do you still label as wrong or unfair? And what if, just for a moment, you could see it as something life placed on your path with intention? Not to punish you, not to break you, but to awaken something deeper in you. Take a breath. Feel the possibility of that thought. Because when you stop fighting reality, you stop fighting yourself. And when you stop fighting yourself, you begin to walk through life with a kind of quiet strength, a resilience that feels unshakable, a heart that stays open even when the world feels uncertain. This is amor fati, not passive acceptance, not forced positivity, but the courage to love your fate, because it is shaping you into someone wiser, calmer, and more awake than you've ever been. 8. Cultivate stillness and mindfulness. Nurture inner calm. I want to introduce you to someone named Maya, a woman who seemed to have it all on the outside, a successful career, a vibrant social life, and yet, inside, she felt like a storm constantly raging. Every morning, she woke up to a whirlwind of thoughts. Deadlines, obligations, worries about the future. Even small challenges felt overwhelming. She tried to push through, as most of us do. Coffee in hand, earbuds in, tasks lined up like soldiers ready to conquer. But no matter how much she ticked off her to-do list, the unease never left. It was like chasing a shadow she couldn't outrun. One day, a close friend suggested something simple, almost too simple to be true. Sit, breathe, just notice. Don't try to fix anything. Maya laughed at first. How could doing nothing possibly help? She was a high achiever. There was no room for nothing. Every second had to be productive, efficient, measurable. But she decided to try. Just 5 minutes. No phone, no notifications, no agenda. Sitting in a quiet room, she closed her eyes and felt the chaos. Her racing thoughts, her anxious heartbeat, her mental chatter. And then something unexpected happened. She noticed it all without reacting. No judgment, no pushing away. Just observation. It was like stepping out of the storm and watching it from a distance. A part of her realized, I am not my thoughts. I am the space in which they arise. That was the beginning of Maya's journey into mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't complicated. It isn't about chanting mantras for hours or escaping life's responsibilities. It's the simple, deliberate act of paying attention fully and kindly to the present moment. Even when life is messy, even when emotions surge. Through daily practice, Maya began to notice something profound. The moments she had spent reacting automatically, snapping at a colleague, panicking over small setbacks, or replaying fears from the past began to lose their grip. She started asking herself a new question. What is actually happening right now? And for the first time, she could answer truthfully, without exaggeration or fear. This is the power of stillness. Not silence outside, but peace inside. A calm mind is not one without challenges. It's one that observes challenges without being swept away. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, yet feeling completely grounded. The wind is fierce. Rain lashes your face. Lightning splits the sky. But you're standing, calm, alert, aware. That is what Maya discovered. Through mindfulness, the storm didn't disappear, but she no longer feared it. She learned to navigate her inner world like a steady captain steering through turbulent seas. Here's the key. Mindfulness creates a gap between stimulus and response. When someone yells at you, a calm mind notices the anger, but doesn't have to react. When a painful memory surfaces, a calm mind observes it, but doesn't dwell. Between the emotion and the action lies a choice. And choice is freedom. Maya also discovered how mindfulness transformed her everyday life. Mornings became richer, not busier. She could drink her coffee and actually taste it, rather than gulping it down while scrolling emails. Walking to the office became a moment of awareness, noticing sounds, colors, and even the rhythm of her breath. Even difficult conversations changed. When a coworker criticized her work, instead of immediately defending herself, she paused, breathed, and responded from clarity, not reaction. Small moments like these multiplied into big shifts. Her anxiety decreased. Her patience increased. And her sense of inner peace, something she had chased externally for years, finally started to settle within her. The science behind this is fascinating too. Research shows that regular mindfulness practice literally changes the brain. It strengthens areas related to attention, emotional regulation, and resilience. Even a few minutes a day can reduce stress hormones and improve your capacity to respond rather than react. But the most important effect is not measurable by MRI or blood tests. It's felt deeply, quietly, like a hidden reservoir of calm you can draw on whenever life gets rough. So, what does this mean for you? Ask yourself, when was the last time you truly paused? Not to check your phone, not to scroll, not to plan the next step, but simply to be? Even one moment of presence can create a ripple. It teaches you that you don't have to be controlled by your thoughts, your fears, or your emotions. You can create space. You can nurture stillness. You can live with clarity and calm, even amid chaos. Maya's story reminds us that cultivating stillness isn't passive. It's an active engagement with life, but from a place of grounded awareness rather than frantic reaction. And when you combine this with the other practices we've explored, embracing your fate, reframing pain, detachment, focusing on what you can control, stillness becomes your anchor. A lighthouse in the storm. A safe harbor where your mind and heart can rest. A place where you can respond with wisdom instead of reacting with impulse. Take a deep breath. Let yourself arrive in this moment. Notice your thoughts without judgment. Feel your body and realize the storm outside doesn't have to dictate the peace inside, because the truth is simple, yet profound. A mind that cultivates stillness sees clearly. A heart that practices mindfulness stays calm. And a life built on both navigates uncertainty with strength and grace. This is the gift of stillness. This is the path of mindfulness. And this is your invitation to begin, here and now. Part 9. Build an unshakable identity. Cultivate inner strength. Let me tell you about a man named Alex. Alex had spent most of his life trying to be someone else. Someone the world would approve of. Someone who fit into every social expectation. At work, he aimed for praise from his boss. On social media, he curated the perfect image, smiles, achievements, milestones. Among friends, he tried to be interesting, witty, likable. On the outside, it looked like he had it all together. But inside, it was a different story. He felt fragile, like his sense of self was a sandcastle, constantly being battered by waves of judgment, comparison, and expectation. Every criticism felt like a blow. Every lack of recognition felt like a failure. It was exhausting. And one evening, alone in his apartment, Alex had a moment of stark clarity. He realized he didn't know who he really was. He had been so busy performing, adapting, pleasing, that he had lost touch with himself. The praise of strangers had become the measure of his worth. The approval of peers had become his anchor. And when that approval wavered, he felt adrift. This is where most people stay trapped. We build our identity around things outside of ourselves. Recognition, possessions, status, even relationships. But what happens when those things change? When promotions are denied? When friends drift away? When the world's applause fades? We crumble. Not because we're weak, but because our foundation is built on sand. Alex knew he needed a change. He needed to cultivate something that no storm could take away. He needed an identity that was unshakable. He began by asking himself one simple yet profound question. Who am I, beyond what others think of me? No job titles, no social media likes, no external validation. He began to explore his own values, passions, and beliefs. What mattered to him when no one was watching? What principles guided him in moments of solitude, uncertainty, or fear? He wrote them down. He reflected on them daily. He allowed himself to feel what was authentic, even if it was uncomfortable. And slowly, something remarkable happened. Alex's sense of self began to solidify. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't about recognition or admiration. It was quiet, rooted, resilient. He could face criticism without shrinking. He could experience failure without despairing. Even when accolades came or didn't, he remained grounded. The key was internal validation, knowing his worth wasn't determined by others' opinions. It came from understanding and embracing his true values. Think about it for a moment. How much of your life is spent chasing approval, seeking recognition, trying to fit into molds designed by others? We live in a world that constantly measures us. Grades, performance reviews, social media likes, peer comparisons. It's easy to forget that the only measure that truly matters is the one inside. Alex had learned this the hard way. By turning inward, he discovered that his identity was not fragile. It didn't waver with praise or criticism. It didn't bend under social pressure. He had become the observer of his own life, not merely a performer. This is the essence of building an unshakable identity. It doesn't happen overnight. It requires introspection. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to face your true self, even the parts you might not like. But here's the truth. The more you align with your inner values, the freer you become. Freer to act without fear of judgment. Freer to love without neediness. Freer to fail without losing yourself. And here's the subtle magic. The world may still throw praise, criticism, or indifference your way, but it no longer controls you, because your foundation isn't external. It's internal, solid, unshakable. Alex's journey also taught him another lesson. Resilience grows when identity is rooted in values, not labels. Titles can be stripped away. Accolades can fade. Opinions can change. But if you know who you are, if you honor your principles, nurture your passions, and respect your truth, you stand firm, even in the face of disappointment, even when the world doubts you, even when everything external seems to crumble. Your foundation is your own. And this is how true power emerges, not through control over others, not through wealth or status, not through public recognition, but through the quiet certainty of self-knowledge, through the unwavering alignment with what you truly value, through the peace of knowing, I am enough, I am whole, I am grounded. Alex eventually realized that an unshakable identity doesn't make life easier. Storms still come, challenges still arrive, pain still knocks on your door. But when your sense of self is anchored, you meet these storms differently, with clarity, with composure, with grace. You don't collapse under the weight of external pressures. You rise. And that, ultimately, is freedom. So, ask yourself, are you building your identity on applause or on authenticity? Are you letting the world define you, or are you defining yourself? Because when your identity is unshakable, criticism becomes feedback, not a sentence. Success becomes celebration, not a necessity. And life, with all its chaos and unpredictability, becomes a canvas on which you can act from your truest self. This is the final piece of the foundation we've been building together. An identity rooted in your values, not in external labels, is your ultimate armor. It's the quiet strength that allows you to walk through life unshaken. And once you have it, nothing, no praise, no criticism, no loss can take away the peace of knowing who you truly are. Part 10. Live from Inner Freedom, the Ultimate State of Mind. Let me introduce you to Sarah. Sarah had spent decades of her life living for others, chasing approval from her boss, her family, her friends. She had mastered the art of doing everything right from the outside. She seemed accomplished, respected, and admired. But on the inside, there was a storm. Every criticism felt like a dagger. Every expectation felt like chains. Every disappointment weighed her down. Her mind was a battlefield of fear, anxiety, and self-doubt. Sarah knew she was living a life ruled by external forces, And one night, after a particularly stressful week, she sat alone and asked herself a question that changed everything. What would it feel like to live free? Really free? Not free in terms of money, status, or success, but free from the invisible chains that controlled her thoughts, her emotions, and her choices. This is the journey most of us avoid. We think freedom is about leaving a job, ending a relationship, or escaping a situation. But true freedom, the kind that transforms your life, comes from inside. Sarah began to experiment. Every time she noticed herself reacting out of fear, guilt, or expectation, she paused. She asked, "Do I truly want this, or am I being pushed by someone else's agenda?" She started observing her thoughts instead of being controlled by them. She noticed the habitual anxieties, the judgments, the shoulds that kept her trapped. And in that observation, something powerful happened. She created space. The Buddha once said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response." Sarah discovered that space. And the more she practiced, the more she realized she was not her emotions. She was not her circumstances. She was not the opinions of others. She was something deeper. A calm, observing presence that could act, choose, and respond, not react. Imagine this for a moment. You wake up in the morning. The world is messy. People are unpredictable. Events don't go your way. And yet, your mind remains unshaken. You don't get thrown off balance by criticism or praise. You don't feel a surge of anxiety when plans fail. You don't need anyone's validation to feel whole. That is the freedom Sarah found. And here's the key. It wasn't about suppressing feelings or ignoring reality. It was about embracing life fully, every joy, every challenge, every disappointment, without losing herself. She realized that fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of failure had been the real prison. Once she let go of those fears, she could move through life with clarity, courage, and calm. Living from inner freedom means you operate from your own center. Sarah learned to pause before reacting, to choose love instead of resentment, to respond with wisdom instead of anger, to act with integrity instead of conformity. It's not passive. It's active mastery over your mind. It's the ultimate empowerment. And the beauty is, the world can throw anything at you, loss, betrayal, disappointment, but your inner state remains untouched. This is the untouchable mindset. Think about your own life for a second. How often are your choices dictated by fear, by expectation, by habit? How often do you find yourself reacting instead of responding? The truth is, most people spend their entire lives giving their power away. To situations, to people, to emotions. They live as if their happiness and peace depend on what happens outside. Sarah's transformation reminds us that true freedom is always internal. It's the space between stimulus and response. It's the calm presence that can observe the storm without being swept away. There were days when Sarah still felt fear, doubt, and frustration. She wasn't perfect, but now she could experience those emotions without being consumed by them. She could feel sadness without collapsing. She could feel anger without acting destructively. She could experience joy fully without clinging. Her mind had become her ally, not her enemy. Her heart had become her compass, not her prison. And the ripple effect was extraordinary. Her relationships improved. Her work became more focused and creative. She made decisions with clarity rather than desperation. And her sense of fulfillment, her true happiness, did not depend on anyone or anything. She had become untouchable, not in the sense of being cold or detached from life, but in the sense of being steady, calm, and aligned with her own inner truth. This is what it means to live from inner freedom. It's not a destination. It's a practice. A daily choice to step into your own center, to live guided by wisdom, not fear, to respond from clarity, not reactivity, to embrace life fully without losing yourself. And once you experience it, everything else in life shifts. Loss doesn't destroy you. Criticism doesn't derail you. Uncertainty doesn't paralyze you. You are grounded. You are calm. You are free. Sarah's story is a reminder. The ultimate power isn't in controlling the world, it's in mastering your mind. The ultimate freedom isn't in changing circumstances, it's in changing your relationship to them. And the ultimate peace isn't in avoiding challenges, it's in living fully through them, untouchable from within. Ask yourself, are you living from others' expectations or from your own freedom? Because the moment you claim that inner space, that untouchable mindset, you discover what it truly means to be free. And once you have it, nothing can take it from you. Conclusion. A quick summary of the key points and the reflective lessons from the video above. You've walked through a journey with us today, a journey of mastering the mind, embracing challenges, and discovering the untouchable core within you. Think about it. Every lesson we explored wasn't just theory. These are real practices that people like Sarah and maybe even you can use to transform daily life. Let's quickly revisit them. First, letting go. Not giving up, not detaching out of fear, but releasing what you cannot control. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips away. But when you open your hand, you feel the freedom of space, and that is your mind, when you let go of attachment and expectation. Second, turning pain into growth. Every hardship you've faced, every mistake, every heartbreak, these are not punishments, they're lessons. Like a seed cracking in the dark to grow into a tree, your struggles are the soil for inner strength. The next time life pushes you down, ask yourself, what is this teaching me? Third, cultivating stillness and inner dialogue. How often do we let our mind run wild with worry, regret, or self-criticism? Observing your thoughts without judgment and guiding your inner conversation with kindness is like being your own mentor, your own best friend. Small choices every day build an unshakable inner fortress. Fourth, accepting everything as part of your destiny. Life is unpredictable, messy, and sometimes painful. But if we see each experience as happening for us rather than to us, we begin to love our life in its entirety, the light and the shadow. This is the heart of amor fati, the love of fate, where every moment is a gift. Fifth, building your identity from within. When your sense of self comes from your values, not external approval, you become unshakable. Praise and criticism lose power over you. Popularity fades, opinions come and go, but the knowledge of who you are remains steadfast. When you practice these lessons, something incredible happens. You start to live from inner freedom, no longer reactive, no longer controlled by fear, anger, or the constant noise of the world. You respond rather than react. You act rather than overthink. You live fully, completely, untouchable at your core. And here's the subtle truth. This doesn't happen overnight. Every small choice counts. Every pause before reacting, every moment of self-reflection, every act of letting go adds to the strength of your mind. Your untouchable mindset is forged in these tiny, everyday decisions. Take a moment and ask yourself, how often do I give my power away? How often do I let circumstances or other people dictate my peace? The answer is where your practice begins. It begins in the small, consistent steps that strengthen your mind, calm your heart, and align your soul. Imagine living a life where storms rage around you, but inside, you remain steady. Criticism, failure, loss, they no longer define your happiness. You don't cling. You don't resist. You simply flow, anchored in the power of your inner freedom. This is what today's journey is really about. Realizing that your mind can be stronger than any circumstance, that your spirit can remain untouched, that your peace is not something given, it is something earned, cultivated, and claimed from within. And so, I leave you with this reflection. You don't have to wait for a perfect life to feel free. You don't need external approval to be whole. Your untouchable mind, your unshakable heart, your serene spirit, it all begins here, in the choices you make each day. If you've ever watched someone close to you struggle under the weight of expectations, fear, or pain, you'll understand why this matters. And maybe, just maybe, you can share this journey with someone else who needs to hear it today. Because real freedom, the kind that nothing can touch, is possible, and it begins with you.